too expensive, unrealistic, or just plain stupid are now, as the prices have risen and risen and risen and just continue to go up, they're now considered economically viable. And so I'm going to talk about primarily tonight I'm going to talk about three types of extreme resource extraction. The first one is hydraulic fracturing or fracking. We may be going over some stuff that you all are very familiar with, but I just want to make sure everyone's on the same page. So I'll go through these relatively quickly. The way that fracking works is that they drill, well, let me say first, the reason, the resource that folks are seeking when they do fracking is these little tiny pockets of natural gas or oil that are dispersed within a layer of shale bedrock. And the way that they get at it is that they drill a hole between 1 and 2 miles deep, oftentimes, into the ground, and then horizontally, sometimes as much as a 1/4 mile. And then they pump a bunch of water, a chemical cocktail of 600 different chemicals, in some cases including things like benzene and uranium and all sorts of other toxic industrial waste products, and sand into that hole in the ground. They pump it in at a great volume. We're talking millions of gallons of water. Your average fracking, an average frack well, one fracking will consume between 5 and 45 million gallons of water, and they often will frack one well multiple times to get as much of this gas or oil out as possible. And then the sand is in there to keep the cracks in the shale that are generated from pumping all this water in open so that the gas and oil can escape. You might notice there's a whole bunch of trucks up there. They have to import lots of water and sand and all this stuff. I've heard that the average fracking operation requires about 400 truck trips to supply it with all the materials it needs. Here's a photo of a well being drilled. That big tall thing is a massive drill, and actually all those trucks that are there right now, every single one of those has a giant diesel-powered generator on the back of it. So there's a lot of fossil fuels going into drilling one of these things to get relatively little product back again. And all that water that they pump into the ground, usually about 30 to 50% of it stays in the ground, maybe leaches upward and gets into aquifers, or maybe just stays there. The rest of it comes back up again, and they put it into these holding ponds. So we've got, at each one of these sites, we've got millions of gallons of now very toxic wastewater that they just set in these ponds and wait for it to evaporate. That's the only plan of how to dispose of this stuff. And because each well gets relatively little output, and this oil or natural gas is so widely dispersed underground, they have to drill multiple well sites. Sometimes hundreds or even thousands. In the state of Colorado alone, there are now 48,000 fracking wells. And of course, that is very relevant to the driftless region here because that means they need a lot of sand. And the sand that's just below the surface of the soil around here is apparently the perfect stuff. And so I grew up in western Wisconsin, but I've been away from home for several years now. I come back and visit occasionally. And let me tell you, I have been shocked. I heard